There we go.
It's Mon Mothma's HoloNet, and we're just posting on it. Welcome back to Mothma News at our 50-day countdown to Andor Season 2. Hello, guest. Would you like to introduce yourself and our topic of the day?
Hello, I am Louay, happy to be back
Again?
on the show, and we will be talking about...
We're going to be talking about what?
Saw Gerrera.
Saw Gerrera, our boy, our homeboy. Thank you so much for joining us, Louay. Let's dive in. So Saw Gerrera exists. He's a character.
He do.
He should apologize to her. No, I'm kidding. They were both right in that speech. Can I start off talking about In the Name of the Rebellion and that fight that they had where he owned her or decimated her, as people say? They were both correct. All right. Because here's the thing. As I have brought up multiple times, Saw is not the person who has the role in the rebellion of planning the what comes next.
Yeah.
His role in the rebellion is essentially, I hate to say it, to die for the cause and take as many imps with him as he possibly can. He acknowledges this. If you asked him, hey, Saw, what should we do after the Empire falls? He'd be like, I don't fucking know. I never thought about it.
Well, yeah, all he's ever known is war.
Exactly. He is at his core a soldier. And yes, he is correct in the, hey, you cannot expect to win playing by their rules.
Yeah.
And she ultimately acknowledges that he is correct in that. Because she's like, she, at that point in time, was slowly chipping away we need to play by their rules. We need to find a diplomatic solution. All of that is ultimately destroyed by the midsection of Rogue One.
Yeah.
When Saw dies, right? And we talked about how Luthen was probably a portion of that destruction of that ideal for Mon of finding a diplomatic solution. But like, it is so timely when it fully happens and we see it. Where, you know, right after this all happens, she's like, I'm sorry, Jin, without full support of the council, you know, the odds are too great. That's her working within the rules that she has laid out for the rebellion, right? They practice democracy in Rebel High Command. And so, you good?
Yeah.
Okay. And so she can't turn around and be like, oh, you know, we're fighting for democracy. And then Rebel High Command makes a decision that she doesn't like. And she's like, actually, I'm going to become a dictator. That's not who she is as a character, right? And so, you know, Jin and Cassian ultimately get together the Rogue One group and they go to fight on Scarif, right? When Mon receives word of this, Draven and Merrick both look to her and she's like, I need to speak to Admiral Radis. It's like, he already left. He's already gone to Scarif to go and fight. And she's like, okay, so the decision was made for me. Right? And this does come up a little bit more in Aftermath when Leia and a few of the others participate in actions that are not sanctioned by the Senate. And she's like, okay, it was different when we were an insurgent group, when we were the rebellion. Now we are the government. Yeah. We have to abide by the rules of our government that we have laid out. Otherwise, the people are not going to trust in us and nothing is going to get done. We're going to fall into the same traps that we did before. And we can't let that happen, right? And of course, Leia has never lived in a galaxy that was practicing democracy as their form of government. So she has no context for what is going on with this in Aftermath. She's just like, well, if something needs to be done, we should go and do it. She is still thinking like a rebel at this point in time. Mon is already like, nope, I'm back full politics mode. I'm chancellor. These are the rules that we have to follow, right? And so it wasn't a matter of, oh, we're playing by the Empire's. were playing by the Empire's rules again. They were playing by their own rules. And with Rogue One, like, again, she didn't make the decision to overrule the council. The people did, right? Which is the core of the rebellion. When you don't agree with what your leaders are saying and doing and allowing, you take up arms yourself and you go and fight. What they did was in the spirit of the rebellion. And I don't think that if Saw was still alive, we would have heard the words come out of Mon Mothma's mouth. No matter what the others say, war is inevitable.
Yeah.
By that point, she's like, diplomatic solution off the table. Our people want to fight back. We have to fight back, right? And she didn't even give her opinion during that council meeting. She let everyone else speak, and she, like, her hands were tied. She was like, if I speak out and say, yeah, we should go and fight, I'm still one voice. We are still outnumbered by the people who are like, no, we shouldn't go and fight, right? Whereas Saw doesn't have that issue. In Saw's group, Saw is the deciding voice. Saw is in charge, right? The Alliance to Restore the Republic it had military aspects to it, but it was a political movement. Saw, paramilitary movement, 100%. He can understand the politics. He can have nuanced ideas about the politics. He's not a politician. That's not what he wants to do. He doesn't solve problems through talking, through diplomatic solutions. He solves his problems with a blaster. Mm-hmm. And when you're in a military group, you have a leader who gives you an order and you go and follow it. You go and do the thing. That is what Saw's group is. So if Saw had been like, go fight on Scarif, they would have gone to fight on Scarif.
Yeah.
They're two completely different leaders, but the rebellion needs them both.
Kind of.
In different capacities. They can't really do each other's jobs, essentially.
Because I would argue by the time of Rogue One, Saw isn't really part of the kind of bit split off and been sort of separated from the rest of them. Like, which speaks to like a united rebellion yet. Like, I would say it doesn't really become a united rebellion until A New Hope and like the Battle of Yavin. And like, I'll get into this more a bit later, but like, one of the things I dislike about how Saw is portrayed in a lot of Star Wars media is they like to use him as sort of just a cautionary tale. Like, oh, are our heroes going too far? Saw Gerrera is going to try to side or whatever. And like, there are places for that kind of story. I think like Ghosts of Geonosis in Rebels was a great episode, or like great. Because like we see Saw has legitimate grievances against the Geonosians, but eventually he learns like, hey, they deserve the chance to rebuild too. Like, he is a nuanced character. And I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, he is a great person all of the time. He does everything he does is justified. Like, it's not. Like, he does take things an extremist, but so is Luke Skywalker, so is Mon Mothma, so is Han Solo. Like, I think that's the thing a lot of people don't understand is like this version of the rebellion in the movies, like that alone could not have won the war. Like, you need people who are willing to do the dirty work, and like there is an important lesson with Saw in like you can't lose yourself to the fight, and that's what happens to him. Like, Saw is an inherently flawed character a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's why I really like his portrayal in Andor, because they really use him intelligently. Like, he does all everything he does is justified. Like, it's not. Like, he does take things kind of brutal calculus kind of character, just like Luthen, but he still has a bit of heart. He still has that hope that we see so far gone. His last words are about saving the rebellion. Like he wants to be the idealist of like other by war and like the loss of his planet, the loss of his sister. Like he's lost so much. All he knows how to do anymore is fight. And I think Andor, it's a very interesting point for his character because he's still like very much in control. Like the partisans are a somewhat respected group in the galaxy, whereas they're seen as more fringe extremist outsiders. So I'm curious to see where he goes this season and like what direction they take him in.
Yeah. I do not like the way he gets treated by Bad Batch stans, just in general, with the, oh, well, it's his fault. I'm sorry. This man is out here trying to fucking stop weapons of mass destruction being created. And I'm coming at this as somebody who loves Tech. Tech is one of my baby boys.
And Crosshair.
Right? And Crosshair. Like, Tech and Crosshair are my Bad Batch boys. Since Echo left the batch. Technically. Like, he left, like, the group.
Yeah.
Crosshair and Tech are my baby boys. Saw's mission was more important than, like, on a galactic scale than the Batch's mission was.
Yeah.
Like, and yeah, as somebody who enjoys the character of Saw Gerrera, seeing how essentially, yes, like his actions in a roundabout way did ultimately lead to like Tech's death. Knowing that hurts. But I'm like, what Saw was trying to achieve was bigger than what the Batch was going for, right? And so, you know, it was a lot of grappling because in the right after watching it, I was like, Saw Gerrera, you're dead to me. And then I was thinking about it. I was like, wait a minute. The people who were at that meeting, these are important people in Imperial weapons development. Krennic, Tarkin, like, these guys are bad. If Saw Gerrera was trying to take them out, ultimately we know because of, you know, our essentially, like, it's similar to dramatic irony, but it's not, because Star Wars is not necessarily told in order. So we know what happens later down the line. We know that Krennic and Tarkin are going to survive. And so that can also cause that bias. Like, oh, well, it didn't do anything in the long run. If Star Wars was told in a linear way, maybe it could have done something. Maybe Stardust would not have gone ahead in the way that it did if Krennic was taken out of the game. Because, you know, as Zach and I talked about when we were talking about Catalyst, Krennic brings Galen on board. Krennic is the reason that Galen stays for so long. Galen does not want to be working in weapons development. This boy is a pacifist. He does not like war. He just wants to play with his little crystals and give energy to the galaxy and do good boy things. And then suddenly it's like, I don't care if you're neurodivergent. You need to frickin' build weapons of mass destruction. Like, so, you know, there's all of that going on. And so thinking about it from a what if lens is very interesting, but I'm like, can people just stop hating on Saw Gerrera for the dumbest reasons of all time? Like, if you're going to dislike him for things like he is a war criminal, but at the same time, we stan Luke Skywalker, we stan Chopper, we stan Princess Leia. Like,
if Saw's mission on Iriadu had succeeded, the Battle of Yavin wouldn't have happened. I think the Death Star still would have been created, but it would have taken so much longer.
Yeah.
argue, oh, the death of those Imperials, they would have just brought more people in, like Tech said. But like, yeah, but those people were still important. Like those people
Mhm.
were still vital to the Imperial
Mhm.
war effort. And like
Yeah. Like they were
they would go
top dogs.
harder. Yeah, like
Mhm.
you could argue it's like, oh, their deaths might mean that the Empire would go harder on the galaxy. It's like, okay, but they can't go much harder. Like they're
Mhm.
stripping planets for resources, enslaving populations,
Mhm.
and
You
that's the
know.
thing, because assassination is a part of war. Like
Yeah.
that's part of war, is like eliminating key personnel. Like
Mhm.
every war in history has had that. Like,
Yeah. Some wars start with an assassination. Hello, Franz Ferdinand. I didn't see you there. But yeah, you're right. Like these assassination plots and attempts are major points of war. And I don't know, maybe at some point I should do a video about all of the attempted assassinations on Mon Mothma. It's it's not a zero amount. It is at least 5 that we know of.
because like
She's
in, for
suffering.
example, in Rebel Rising,
Mhm.
saw like the partisan, but like they attack a party on this planet that's like
Yeah.
becoming part of the Empire.
Mhm.
And like, tragically the Queen and like but he also killed an Imperial Moff that was close friends with Palpatine.
Yeah.
Like you could argue whether or not it was justified the way they did it or not.
Mhm.
He got results.
Mhm.
Like that's the thing with Saw, is like you could make the argument that he is a terrible person and you would have merit, but
Yeah.
a soldier, like he is a weapon at the end of
Mhm.
the day. And
Yeah.
like whether or not that's okay is up to the narrative, but like need people like him. Like the rebellion
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to
Mhm.
recruit people, stand on its own, if they hadn't survived
Mhm.
past the point of the Battle of Yavin. That people were, for lack of a better term, woke about the Death Star, because he because he was the one out here being like, the Imperials are building. I don't care about Thrawn and all this other bullshit. I like they're building a planet killer, and I'm going to
Mhm.
find it. And he
Mhm.
did. He's the
He did.
reason that the rebel, like,
Yeah.
more forthcoming with the information once he got it from Bodhi. But like, I get why somebody like him. I get why somebody like him has a creature in his base that tells the truth and like reveals the set of shit.
Yeah.
Like, is it
Yeah.
fully justified? Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Is he more paranoid than he should be? Absolutely. But he's also, I think they very much in Rogue One tried to do the whole more machine than man kind of thing with
Yeah.
him. And like show that he's slowly losing. And like, is he a perfect rebel? No, but like he he did what he needed to do, and he got, and when the rebellion needed it, like, and he gave it to Jin because he trusted her, and she
Mhm.
did the right thing with that information.
Yeah.
She like, he would, if he had surpassed Jeddah, like he would have been the one telling her like, fuck the council, you need to go to Scarif
Mhm.
now.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
she made that decision and she roused all those people. Like that was Saw's influence.
Mhm.
Like,
And
not to
I
give him the full credit, she still
yeah.
did it, but
Yeah.
like,
And she even invokes him in her speech that she gives on the U-Wing, where she's like, Saw used to say that one fighter with a sharp stick and nothing left to lose could take the day, right? That
yeah.
made them feel like, holy shit, we have a chance here. We can do this, because we
Mhm.
have more than just a sharp stick. We have a plan. We have our goal. We have weapons that are bigger than sticks. And then later down the road, a handful of freaking little Ewoks with little more than some sticks were able to take the day. Saw would have loved the Ewoks. And I do think that
Rip
it's
to
also
Saw
important.
Gerrera. You would have loved the Ewoks.
I also think that it's really important that you brought up in like Rogue One how they were going for the more machine than man thing with Saw. And we see the only time that he feels really human and vulnerable is when he sees Jyn. And
Yeah.
he's scared, like, did you come here to kill me? Right? And not like Rogue One, because I hadn't watched like the Clone Wars series until after I saw Rogue One. Like the first time I watched the Clone Wars series in full was with you, right?
Yeah.
Same with Rebels. And so, you know, my first context for Saw was Rogue One. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't understand his character quite as much as I do now. I feel like the more that you know about Saw Gerrera, the more you understand who he is and where he's coming from. And to bring up, again, you mentioned in Rebel Rising how he kills an Imperial Moff who is close to Palpatine. That's not the only time he does this. And another big instance of it is when he kills Panaka in Leia, Princess of Alderaan, right? We've kind of talked about this before, but not like mic'd up and everything. And essentially, like, Panaka had potentially figured out that Leia is Padme's daughter. And he was going to go to Palpatine with that information. So it's like, yes, Saw did put Leia in danger by nearly blowing her up. However, perfect timing because Panaka did not get that message to Palpatine. And that is a big thing that Bail and Brea have to grasp and work out in their minds is they're like, did how much time between you leaving him and him blowing up, like would he have had time to send that message? And ultimately we know Palpatine didn't have the time because otherwise that would have been very, very bad for Alderaan. So it's like, yeah, net positive, Saw Gerrera does fairly well. And another thing I don't think is brought up enough about Rogue One is the idea of who, or even just in the Rebellion, who has the luxury of which ideals and things to believe in. Right? Because Mon doesn't have the luxury of being like, I don't need to worry about what happens after the war. Right? That is her job. Saw doesn't have the luxury of being like, we have to do things in a way that is palatable to the Empire in order to ultimately get rid of the Empire and take over. He doesn't have the luxury of that. And the idea of what do they individually have the luxury to worry about? Because having any type of worry is like outside of your basic needs. Like if you're worried about where your next meal is coming from, that's not a luxury. But worrying things about, like, you know, what comes next for the galaxy, you know, whether or not we're going to fight this battle, whether this is going to be a helpful or a hindrance to the overall cause of the rebellion. Having, in Jin's case, political opinions, those things are luxuries to them because they're in a constant fight or flight situation, essentially. And their bodies are hardwired for the fight at this point, especially Saw and Jin. Right? And so, you know, and Saw's like, you could stand to see the Imperial flag reign across the galaxy. And she's like, it's not a problem if you don't look up. Because she has been so downtrodden, right? Because you've read Rebel Rising. You know, right? You've read Rebel. Yeah. I was like, I bought you Rebel Rising. I'm pretty sure that you read it. I know that we've talked about it and you just mentioned it, but I wanted to make sure that you remember what I've been talking about. Because we see, you know, she was jailed in a very inhumane and horrible place in Wobani, which if we take a look at Wobani versus a place like Narkina 5, I have a lot of thoughts about that. And the way that, you know, Narkina 5, it was all human men that we saw, and then Wobani. Sure, there were human males that were imprisoned on Wobani, but there were more aliens. Jin is a human, like a female human prisoner, like all of these other things. It was much more inhumane and unsanitary the way that Wobani was handled, as opposed to a place like Narkina 5, right?
Yeah.
So, again, Jin doesn't have the luxury of being like Cassian when he was on Narkina 5, being like, okay, got to come up with an escape plan with my cell buddies, right? With the people that I'm working with. Jin's cellmate was threatening to kill her. She had to sleep with one eye open. She did not have the luxury of being like, I have to plan my escape. But even before she got to Wobani, the shit that she went through after Saw left her for her own good was insane. Right? Like, she literally felt like she could not do anything by that point in time. She didn't understand why she had been chosen. And ultimately, I think she saw in her what people like Saw and Mon saw in her. And that was all of her strength, all of her fight that she was not going to be able to give up on, because that's who she is, right? She's very much like Lyra in that, and then raised to be a brilliant soldier by Saw.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Credit to Gerrera, like, fully.
And I love Saw, but I can comfortably say that, like, he definitely failed as a guardian to Jin by not being able to create for her. Like, I get why he did what he did. I do. And I like his logic is sound, but from an emotional perspective, like, he did abandon. Must have sucked for her. Like, I think that's why her relationship with him is so tumultuous in Rogue One. Like, she does still care about him, but at the same time, she's like, you left me. Like, you left me. But again, like, Saw at that, like, I talk about it all the time with Saw. Losing Stila was so, because it shattered his worldview like nothing else ever could. Like, if his sister had been alive, then, like, he would be a completely different character, and the Partisans would be completely different. Because even if Saw was still in command of the Partisans, having Steel would have, like, mattered so much, because we see her, she's more of the charismatic leader type. Like, not to say Saw isn't charismatic, he is, but, like, he's more of, like, a warm, like, we will do this, we will hold the line. Whereas Stila is more about hope and stuff. Like, Stila could have bridged the gap between the Partisans and the rebellion. Mon would have been much more willing to reason with her than she was to reason with Saw. Like,
Yeah.
Because even though she's a soldier, like, she would have been able to understand Mon's perspective because of her relationship with Lux. Like, she knows politicians. She understands the need to. So she would have tempered Saw.
Yeah.
Not to say that, like, Saw can't exist without needing, like, a different character to support him. Really broken that, like, he needs someone to, and, like, Jin could have been that too. Jin could have been that substitute if but like, because he didn't give himself that chance to like have her fully in, fell off the deep end. Like, he was so broken that he didn't trust anyone, not even his closest people anymore, and in front of his eyes, to give up that information. So, like, it's not that he's a good person or a bad person. He's just an intensely broken person. People can argue all day about people can argue all day about how significant he was, like his mark on. He fought the good fight, and he did care about seeing peace in the end, even if he wouldn't have known what to do with that peace. Anyways, go on.
Yeah. He is just a simple man trying to make his way through the galaxy, except
Jango Fett
he has to go to war. In a way that Jango never did. And sometimes when I think about Saw, I like to play the little thought experiment of, like, for significant characters, what would have happened to them if they had survived and lived to see, like, the new world that they were fighting for. And every time, the only thing I can think of for Saw is that one clone trooper on is it Dayu in Obi-Wan Kenobi?
Oh, on the
the stormtrooper. Oh, not the stormtrooper, the clone trooper that was literally reduced to begging. And while I don't think that Veterans Affairs in the New Republic would have been quite that bad, I don't know if Saw would have been able to allow himself to rely on the government in a way of, like, yeah, I'm comfortable with the government helping me and supporting me in this way. You know what I mean? Because he's very distrustful of the government, which I respect, which is why I'm like, while I don't think he would ever do it, because he is a blasters first problem solver, he would be a terrifyingly good politician, because the people that follow him in part because he's able to convince them with his words. This man has good words, and when you read The Mask of Fear, you will see what I mean. Like, the words that this man speaks, I'm like, holy shit, now I want to fight for the partisans. Right? And so I'm really excited to see, hopefully in Andor season 2, because the bit in the trailer at the end, a lot of people have speculated that that's Wilman Pack, who I'm like, if we see him become a partisan, A, it makes so much sense for him. B, I want to see how that plays out. I want to see what Saw says to him to fully bring him on side. Because we know this kid was like, these motherfuckers killed my father. They took him, tortured him, and then hanged him. Right?
Yeah.
And, like, as Captain Tigo says, like, well, what's left of him anyway? So it's like, we don't know what state Pac was in when that happened to him. But we also know that, like, from experience, that they would just leave people hanging there on Ferrix because Marva has this trauma regarding Clem, right?
Yeah.
Where for the longest time she couldn't walk past the square because she would just see Clem hanging there. And so if Wilmon had to see that, I fully understand why he's like, I'm going to use the knowledge that I have inside my young brain, why that would radicalize him to build a pipe bomb. Like, I understand him. And I think that a lot of people would be like, what he did was bad. Yeah, but I think Saw would really respect it. He'd be like, you built a bomb with your 2 hands and blew up a bunch of frickin' Imperials. Come join the partisans, my friend. And I think I think what we can get into is the idea of, because I'm not trying to portray this as necessarily a bad thing, even though the description may sound a little bit bad. I think we have the opportunity to explore how specifically young men get radicalized into groups like that, like extremist groups, right?
Definitely.
And again, you can be you can be an extremist group that is trying to do something good, like the Partisans or the rebellion as a whole, or you can be radicalized into something like the Empire, right? There's two different angles that you can look at it from. And I think that we have, like, Andor season 2 has a really interesting opportunity to do something like that. Because we haven't really seen Saw connect with a young man like this.
No.
As like a mentor to said young man. And I think that I'm really hoping that it's Wilmon Pack that he is talking to. Because I'm like, it's, just because I think that characters like that are so important. Because,
Yeah.
you know, he was ready to fight the Empire before. I think all of the people of Ferrix at that point were ready to fight back. They just needed the catalyst. Wilmon had already gone through his catalyst, which was losing his father, right? Because it's kind of implied that he doesn't have his mom around anymore. And yeah, sure, he could have leaned on somebody like Marva or Bix, like as either like a mother role or an older sister role, because Marva as a community leader was well respected. A lot of people like supported her and she supported them, right? Bix got along well with Wilmon's father. So it could have worked like that, or even like the Daughters of Ferrix could have maybe done something, but I think that they didn't have necessarily the ability to do anything in that very short period of time. And it sucks, right? But I think that it's also important to tell stories like this.
Yeah.
Like, being radicalized by the death of your father and blowing people up, bad. But understanding this type of thing is a good idea because, you know, in our society, we see so many young men get radicalized into extremist ideologies. And look at where that has led us. Bad place. We are in the bad place. And so, you know, I'm excited to see that kind of progression. And I know I kind of turned this into talking about Wilmon Pack for a little while, but it does
That's fair.
strongly relate to Saw Gerrera because Saw was about his age, like Wilmon's age, when the Clone Wars were going on. And the Clone Wars really radicalized Saw. So he knows, he understands what it's like, right? To lose everything and just all that's left of you is that fire inside of you that tells you to keep fighting, right? So I think that Saw is very, very, very important, and he's relevant to Andor season 2 because he's gonna be in it. I'm so excited! Ooh! Forrest Whitaker looks so good in those behind the scenes shots from the special look. I'm like, and every time I see him, like, throughout the ages, like, the more that he's referred to them as like augmentations of his humanity, because I don't think that like he's like a machine. He's still human, but he requires like mechanics to continue functioning because he's been a soldier for so long and he has suffered in this fight. The closer I see the closer we see him get to the Saw that we see in Rogue One, the more my brain just keeps firing off things, and I'm like, I just Saw, please, please. Right?
I mean, it's interesting to talk about that too, because we both know Star Wars kind of has an depicting villainous or like characters having some sort of disability, which is, you know, an old story trope, doesn't go just to Star Wars. But I think what's in Saw's case, they way, because we know based on every other part of this franchise that there are good prosthetic cybernetics and stuff like that. Saw doesn't have those. We can see that everything Saw has was kind of like scrapped together, probably by one of his men or something. Like he's so off the deep end that he's I need to go to like an official place to like recover and like his prosthetic, like look at his prosthetic leg and compare that to Luke's prosthetic hand. Like Saw is so down in the mud that like he's not even willing to give himself proper cybernetic care. He's literally just like going and like breathing, and that is it. Like that is all I will accept. Like it goes to show sort of his paranoia, and also I think it was a narrative choice.
Even
sorry, go on.
Yeah, even
I'll get to this after.
Even when you compare, say, his prosthetic leg to Anakin's prosthetic hand, Anakin's is much more, it's sleeker, right? Like the metal is still exposed, but it feels more like a hand, right? And it's like it functions very similar to Luke's, which again, Luke's was done like 20 years later, so the advances that they would have had are completely different. But yeah, like there's a lot in the like narrative trope of, oh, this disabled person is like a bad guy. And I think the biggest things we see of that in Star Wars would be characters like Darth Vader, right? And you know, I just want to ask Saw Gerrera, when was the last time you saw a Bacta tank girl? Like, I could hear him like asking me, what the fuck is a Bacta tank? And I'm like, that checks out. Because
like he's nothing but battle scars.
Yeah, to him, that would be a luxury that he cannot afford, right? To him, his scars are a badge of honor. And I think that they validate his view of himself as a soldier who has suffered and sacrificed. So he could be like, I got this scar doing this. I got this scar doing this. Whereas other characters who bear their scars internally don't have that luxury. And people can look at them and be like, what have you sacrificed? And that's we're going to blame who I'm talking about. It's Mon, right? She has so many internal scars. She's suffered things and she's been like why don't I have the scars? And it's because the Bacta removes those scars, right? And to her, she doesn't like the little bit of her gaslighting herself, like, oh, well, I mean, it can't have been that bad. But she has still suffered and sacrificed, but she can't point to a scar and be like, this scar comes from when, you know, a stormtrooper put a knife through my arm or some shit like that, right? Whereas Saw can be like, this scar is from this exact event.
Yeah.
And this is what I did. This is all this. And so in a way, like, you know, so much of his character's story is told through his scars. Because when you see him in the Clone Wars, he is young, not a scar on him. You see him in Rogue One, that is a completely different man.
Yeah.
Because I remember when we were watching the Clone Wars, and I had seen Rogue One several times. And I was like, that's Saw Gerrera. That's the guy from Rogue One. Like, what happened to him? And I realized he'd been at war basically since the Clone Wars, up until like actively at war on the front lines. And I think he's so incredibly brave and courageous and strong in a way that so many people would just not give half a fuck about. Right? Because it's easy for the Empire to be like, he needs to be taken out. He's a problem, you know, all of these other things. And it's really easy for people who have the luxury of fighting outside of the front lines to criticize him. And that, I'm going to say, is a flaw that Mon has, right? And I don't want, again, I'm not going to spoil the Mask of Fear, but there is a part in it where he's like, we don't target civilians. And as somebody who has, you know, watched and read so much more of his story, I'm like, what exactly happens to get you to that point where that becomes okay for you?
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, in my mind, there's no real justification for it, but I know by the time he gets there, he's like, he can acknowledge, like, yeah, okay, so the Empire came out of the Republic, but the Republic mostly followed their own rules of engagement, right? Targeting civilians was not something that they did for funsies. The Republic was not stripping planets of resources and enslaving populations for funsies. Could the Republic have done more to deal with slavery in the Outer Rim? Probably. But when you look at the Senate and the prequels, that probably becomes a...
I mean, also, if you look at the Clone Wars, think of the Battle of Umbara. Think of the Battle of Geonosis. Civilians definitely died in those attacks.
Yeah.
Like, because it's not the focus of the narrative, but like it definitely happened.
It definitely
I'm sure
happened.
there's countless other examples of the Republic going too far during the Clone Wars. Like the institution by any stretch, even like Palpatine notwithstanding.
Yeah, and like, but the point is that like they were conducting military operations against a military. The Empire for funsies will be like, there's no military presence on this planet aside from us. Okay, let's massacre a bunch of civilians. So all of these rules that the Republic like tried to follow or did their best to follow were being broken by the Empire. So while Saw was like, yeah, we didn't always completely agree with Republic rules of engagement, but we didn't do these specific things. When the Empire starts doing these specific things, it very much changed the way that Saw operated, right?
Yeah.
Because he's like, if you're going to be targeting just civilians for funsies, and you're going to be enslaving populations for funsies, and you're going to be doing all of this shit because you can, I need to fight harder. I need to change the way that I operate. And again, like when Saw and Mon have their discussion in the name of the rebellion, Mon has not got to that point yet. Because at her core, she is a diplomat and a historian, right? So much of her focus is what will happen tomorrow in the new world that we are trying to build, and what will future generations think about what we are doing. Those are two things that are always going on in her head. And a third thing is, I am always being watched. Every movement that I make has to be done in a way that, like, if this were to be seen by people, like, it wouldn't sully everything that I have done up until that point, right? If she's like, don't kill civilians, and then she kills a civilian, like, you know, and of course, like, yes, in Republic operations, innocent people would have died, but it's never really a but. It's the fact that, you know, it wasn't the purpose of what they were doing. Whereas like the purpose of what the Empire does, gonna bring it up again, the Gorman massacre is to massacre a peaceful population that is peacefully protesting for basic rights.
Yeah.
What the Empire does to Alderaan, a planet, an entire planet of about 2 billion people, blown up because of potentially, because there was no actual real confirmation at that point for the Empire that the Organas were directly involved in the rebellion, right?
Mhm.
Sure, you can be like, oh, well, the Tantive 4 was at Scarif, and they knew that. Princess Leia had been in possession of the Death Star plans. They thought they knew that. They knew that they were on the Tantive 4. There was no proof that the plans had ever been in Leia's hands. But even with all of that essentially plausible deniability that Leia had, and the lack of concrete proof, they still killed 2 billion people because they could, to make a point.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you see it.
And it was very much not a military operation. Because Leia was like, oh, the rebel base is on Dantooine. And Tarkin's like, no, actually, we're going to blow up a place
I was about to say that.
with no military bases, full of civilians. So it had to have been something like that that ultimately changes Saw's mind and is like, okay, well, if civilians get caught in the crossfire of me fighting the Empire, this is something I have to live with. Yeah. And I don't think Mon ever reaches the point where she's like, civilian death is okay. Because to her, it's not. And, you know, if Saw lived in a better galaxy, he would probably agree with her, where he'd be like...
He did agree at one point. He did agree.
Exactly. And so, you know, like, I think he would have loved to have held on to that belief because it felt very important to him in the Mask of Fear when he's having this discussion. And so I'm like, and that's part of like losing yourself to the cause. That ultimately is what happens to Saw. And that hurts because he's such a great character and he deserves better.
I mean, we kind of, going back to what you were saying about the Mask of Fear, and he's like, we don't target civilians. You could argue it's kind of a character degradation for him because we see during the Clone Wars, they learn that lesson on Onderon. Like Steele is like, oh, the people are afraid of us. Like, this isn't, like, sure, we're winning the battle, but at what cost? And then like eventually they figure out a way to protect the people. And like, he starts out in like post Revenge of the Sith with those ideals, like, hey, you know, we have to do this right. Like the first thing we see him doing in the Bad Batch is like, I could be wrong, I'm pretty sure they were civilians, like getting civilians off world. Like that's not something we've come to expect when you see his later depictions. So like, happen. And we were talking a bit in the Luthen video about how the Gorman Massacre might affect Luthen, might affect Mon. It'll probably also have a profound effect on Saw because like, he's seen so many worlds fall, and like he's like, and like at some point he's gonna say enough is enough. Like we have to, we will win this fight no matter the cost. And I think
part of the reason, go on.
Part of the reason a lot of people don't like Saw as a character, I think, and this is just my opinion, I think it's because he's a very self-righteous character. Like, arguably bad things, and he's very not I wouldn't even say smug, but he's very like, this is what I have to do. Like we see it a bit in the name of, he's like very self-righteous about the whole like like I am fighting correctly. We see it in Andor with the I'm the only one with
clarity of purpose. Sorry, I love that line
in that whole show.
It's so based.
Whereas Luthen, I think, is somebody who I think the reason audiences have taken more to Luthen is does those bad things as well, but he's a little bit more hesitant's the wrong word. He's a little bit more self-reflective about it. Whereas Saw could argue that's a character flaw for him, and like it is, but I don't think it makes him a worse character in my opinion.
I think that like the flaw with Saw is that he can't fathom the idea of him being wrong. Right? I think that while he is capable of nuance when it comes to fighting the Empire, he thinks very black and white. He's like, Empire bad, me fight Empire mean me good, right? That very black and white, very basic thinking. And that's all fine and dandy. Because again, he's not in a position where he needs to think about all of the nuances of the situation. He doesn't need to worry about the optics. He knows he is going to die in this fight. He does not need to worry about what comes tomorrow and how he will be perceived in the history books. He does not care about that. That is not his domain to live in, right? And I think one of the reasons why the Gorman massacre is going to have such an impact on so many people in the galaxy is because of the amount of times that we have been told this is a peaceful world of peaceful people. And we also know of another world, of another peaceful world of peaceful people that suffers at the hands of the Empire. Gorman is not that far off from Alderaan. Right? Like, or even Chandrila, right? And we know that the second Death Star had a list of planets to destroy, and Chandrila and Mon Cala were on that list. Like, and I fully believe that if Starkiller Base hadn't been destroyed when it had been, there would have been a list as well. Yeah. And Chandrila would have been on it. Chandrila was always going to be a target, right? And part of that is slightly because of the Star Wars belief of like the planet of hats. And Chandrila very much has been like the planet of politics. And so you have this planet where, essentially I feel like most of the population would be woke as fuck. But they're all like, they all understand, like it's perceived that all Chandrilans like understand the politics and how like the optics matter and all of these things, and they're so politically minded. Those are not people you want to keep alive. Those are enemies that you're like, I want to keep you so close to me so that I can keep an eye on you. And that very much, it kind of, Chris Kemschel kind of talks about that a little bit in The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire, where it's like, well, why didn't Palpatine just get rid of senators like Bail Organa and Mon Mothma and replace them with senators that were loyal to the regime? Because it was easier to keep an eye on them and what they were doing when they were on Coruscant. It's way harder. The
Separatists did it too.
Yeah.
Mina Bonteri.
And it's like, it's so, and it's just like, yeah, it's so much more difficult to have spies following Mon around Chandrila, following Bail around on Alderaan. Like, that would be way more difficult than just being like, no, they can remain in the Senate so that we can keep an eye on them. So we know what they're saying. We have a better idea of what they're doing, right? And of course, if they get out of hand, that's when we step in, like you said, with Mina Bonteri and the Separatists. Of course, we also know that the Separatists were pawns in Palpatine's game. And the whole Clone Wars is very much summed up by the Umbara arc with the we were fighting ourselves, which is also summed up with where Cassian is talking about Mimban and how the Empire had them fighting each other and like themselves. It's a whole circle of this war is just me fighting basically me in a different font or in a different color helmet. And the fact that it's just so cyclical, I hate Palpatine a lot.
You know who is also a very similar character to Saw? Cham Syndulla.
Yes. Cham Syndulla.
One of my favorite lines in Wars.
In Clone Wars?
In season 1. In the Ryloth arc, it's the episode where Mace is with Cham and they're talking and he, well, why won't you help me stop this occupation? And Cham is like, how long before I'm fighting you, Master Jedi? Like, because he understands, like, if the Republic takes over army on the, like, to him, that's just another army. And we see in the Bad Batch, how that all shapes out with Orn Free. But
Hauser! Don't make me cry over Hauser. Or baby Chopper. It's just regular Chopper, but baby.
Because in Rebels, with the whole thing of like, Hera's like, we need this we need this ship for the rebellion.
Yeah.
And Sham's like, no, I want to blow it up to show my people that like we're not going to stand for this. Is that not I was trying to do on Jeddah in what's it called? Guardians of the Wills.
Yeah.
That's what it's called, right? The
yeah,
Cherudin Bays
the
book.
Cherudin Bays book, yeah. Guardians of the Wills. Yeah,
Like,
that is such a
trying
that
to
is
do.
a
He's
good
like,
point.
I want to blow up this Star Destroyer. And like they make the point, they're like, yeah, they'll just send another one. It's like that's not the point. The point is like
it's part of the point, but
that's
it's like I want to make a point that we can, because it's like, yeah, sure, they can send another one. We'll blow up that one too. Right? But it's like you kind of understand both. Like I understand both sides because it's just like, yeah, if they send another one, just blow the other one up. But I'm also like, it could be a resource. It could be a good resource.
Short-sighted in some ways. He doesn't always see the forest through the trees.
Yeah.
Whereas similar with Cham, the only reason Cham gets talked was he had his daughter there to talk him down, to be like, hey, we are both fighting for Ryloth in our own ways.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is, because sure, he had Jin, but he basically sent her away before she had the chance to have an influence on him. Like, I think part of the reason he abandoned her, it was, but also I think it was self-sabotage. I think he was partially worried, like, hey, if I let this kid get too close to me, she's going to end up just as broken as I am.
Mm-hmm.
Me just projecting, me wanting to think the best of him. Like, but like, I don't know. I think if he had allowed Jin to stay close to him, he would have, not to get too deep into what ifs, but I think if he had lived past the Battle of Yavin, I think he would have had a very interesting relationship with Leia. Because I think Leia connected with him on a level that Mon Mothma never could. Because Leia's not a soldier per se, but she understands war. She's like similar to this conflict. Like, and especially, I don't think he would have lived as long as like Return of the Jedi, or he definitely would have been out of the fight by then. But like if he lived past there, been very interesting to see how he would react to. I haven't read Aftermath, so correct me if I say anything wrong. But with like the rise of the First Order, been the first one to be like, hey, some shit's going on. You need to look into this. Like, I don't think he would have been part of the resistance in like a combative sense, but I think he would have been a huge capacity he could be in terms of like, hey, fuck the First Order.
So essentially, they didn't get wind of the idea. Okay, so the Imperial Remnant still existed in the Aftermath books, and that's what they were fighting against. The First Order didn't technically come into play until Bloodline, which is, I think, about 5 years, maybe less than that, before The Force Awakens. And Leia has a big role in being like, hey, we've got to do something about this. And that's how she ultimately comes to work very closely with Ransom. And then Ransom ends up in prison for essentially not towing the party line. And so, you know, that's kind of how that happens. Again, you should read the Aftermath books. You should read Bloodline. I think that you'll really enjoy them. They're so good. Like,
I've heard nothing but good things.
Yeah. Like sometimes like in a battle scene, it'll be like a little bit odd, the writing choices, but I'm like, I'm not here for the battles. I'm here for the politics. I'm here for the politics. I don't care what your battles look like or your lightsaber fights. I'm here for the Senate scenes and the political discussions.
I think because it was Chuck Wendig, right?
Yeah, Chuck Wendig, yeah.
I think his big, the espionage and the witty
Mhm.
and like the interesting dialogue. Fight
Mhm.
scenes are not his forte, and that's fine. Like, because
Yeah.
that's not really what the book is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas you see in the opposite capacity, some writers are really good at fight scenes and they
Mhm.
struggle with dialogue.
Yeah.
I'm talking about me.
Um, and then of course Claudia Gray, beloved, can do no wrong. I'm really glad that you met her before reading The Fallen
Yeah,
Star. She did
because I
Bloodline,
didn't
and
hate
it's
her.
so good. It's so good. Um, yeah. Okay. I think we know how Saw is relevant to Andor season 2. Why did you want to talk about Saw in addition to Luthen so badly?
I just think he's neat.
I just think he's neat. Okay, Marge Simpson holding a potato.
No, but like he like very happy with Andor in terms of
Mhm.
how they've represented him. Because you know me, I'm very protective of Saw and how he's represented. And like I will say about it first, but honestly, I like his portrayal in Rebels for the most part. There's certain
Mhm.
aspects where I'm like, all right, why is Hera being such a dick to him? Like, you know,
I mean, he did kidnap her
here.
children, so
But anyways, I
yeah,
think
you with Saw is very much like me with Mon, where it's just like
truly
you hear that somebody's writing him, and you're like, I don't know how they're gonna do this. I don't want them touching my baby.
because that brief tangent I was gonna go on earlier.
Yeah.
I love Rogue One. It's one of the best films in the franchise, and you know me, I can't even rank them, but like I love it no matter what. I will say, I think the weakest aspect of Trey Shaw because he's not given enough time in the narrative
Hmm.
to really be fleshed out. Because
Yeah.
it's great in the context of I've read, I've watched the Clone Wars, I know all this stuff. Watching the film by itself, if you don't know who Saw Gerrera is, they don't tell you basically anything about. I think
Yeah.
like, and I'm glad that you've grown to like him since that was your first introduction to him. But I don't think it is a good introduction of his
Mm.
character.
Yeah. Like I
Pure
remember the
opinion. I'm
first
not saying
time.
it's a bad film.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, as somebody who, like who has come to love Saw and who watched Rogue One, and that was my introduction. It was one of those situations where, again, maybe this is in part because I've always loved Mon, but I'm just like, she's saying the name of somebody that I don't know, and I feel like I should know who he is. And I felt like I was like, why don't I know who he is? Something's wrong. Um, yeah, I do say that, like, overall, Rogue One, it it's not a bad portrayal of his character, but it's not a great introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if that makes sense,
And
you
like
know.
the way he was handled in the main plot, I think it was way too complicated. Like looking
Yeah.
back, like with the whole Bodhi has the information. Saw won't give it to them because XYZ. Like, I think in terms of the screenplay, they way too overcomplicated it. But anyways, that's a discussion about. Overall, from a metatextual perspective, we've talked about the fact that like I don't love how the partisans are portrayed in Rogue One because they kind of from a vision of like Middle Eastern extremist group in terms
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
and like I think that's kind of what they were going for, like Jeddah, the holy city. Like they weren't very,
Yeah. We've talked a lot
but
about Jeddah and like the Middle East relationship that we have seen, and you're coming up on reading the Battle of Jeddah soon in the High Republic, and I think that phase 2 really goes more into that with what they were trying to
yeah,
do with the small little building blocks that we saw in Rogue One, with the idea of the holy city and how it's been plagued by unrest for so long. And it's one of those things that I didn't really it didn't really click for me until you and I first had that discussion, and I was like,
hmm
that makes sense. Because while I try to be as knowledgeable as possible, that's not necessarily a thing that I feel confident enough to talk about. You know, being the white person that I am. Right. And so, you know, it was one of those things that I was like, yeah, like that I can see the connection. And then those connections started to grow more when I was reading phase 2 of the High Republic. And then we were talking about it and I was like, oh, okay, cool. So, you know, I am reading this correctly. And I do have to say there's worse portrayals of like other cultures and like stereotypes and things within Star Wars than what they were doing on Jedha. But yeah, like again, the films are very much like a snapshot of the whole story. And so that's why I think we need things like books and the TV shows and comics and all of these other things. Because if you don't have that, you're not really going to understand most of these characters that have these storied histories, like Saw, like Mon. And, you know, it's really cool to see also how different writers of different backgrounds add layers to these stories that, you know, one person being in charge of the entire franchise wouldn't have been able to encapsulate quite as well. And yeah, like also I think that some of the pushback against Saw from the fandom can be attributed to racism. We know that the Star Wars fandom does have a bit of a racism problem. I say bit. It's pretty prominent. And, you know, so that's one of the reasons why I get a little bit like, when people are like, I don't like Saw Gerrera, I hate Saw Gerrera, unless I like already trust the person and know that they're like, I don't like this about Saw Gerrera, I'm like,
I mean, liking is such a massive red flag to me. Because
which
like,
one? Not liking Saw?
Not liking Saw and loving Luthen. That combination.
Yeah.
Because
I'm like, why?
But they have very similar ideologies.
Yeah.
I'm like, come on.
Yeah. It's not a good thing to have to deal with because I'm like, this just doesn't make sense. Also, yeah, last thing I kind of want to say personally is that I really don't like when people, even when they verbatim put the words that Saw says to Mon down and they just post what he says to her. I'm like just remember that when you lose, like you fought according to their rules. Like you are ignoring so much context and the importance of this scene for both characters because the big part of it isn't what he says there. It's when she snaps and she raises her voice, which is something we do not see Mon Mothma do. And he says, there she is. That's the leader that the rebellion needs. And she keeps fucking going. And I'm like, I feel like she's yelling at me. I can't do this. That's actually the most important part of that scene is the fact that she is willing to push back and that she never says you're wrong. And he never says that she is wrong. They're looking at it as you are going about this the wrong way from my perspective. It is a debate. It is a challenge. And overall, I still think it is very respectful because neither one of them reduces it to logical fallacies or ad hominem attacks, right? It very much is a good debate. It is a good argument. And I really like that because I'm like, this is so important to see. And people are just like, oh, he told her. And I'm like, she also told him off. And it just doesn't, I'm like, that scene has so much more context that people are willing to overlook. And I've noticed, the reason that I wanted to bring that up is I've noticed in the past month or so, a lot of people trying to use what Saw says to Mon as a clapback to Democrats who are playing by the rules in their eyes. And I'm like,
Yeah.
as a politician, you should not have to know how to navigate a fascist regime.
Mm-hmm.
Hot take. And yeah, I do think that a lot more politicians, both in fiction and in the real world, could grow a spine. But Mon Mothma is not a spineless politician who is rolling over and showing Palpatine her belly. She has been like antagonistic of this administration since she was one of the primary architects of the delegation of 2000.
Yeah.
She'd been a problem. Even before that, because she is not a fan of Palpatine at all. And that, if you read E.K. Johnston's Padme trilogy, that is a thing of like, where, like, Mon's like, is Senator Amidala more loyal to the Republic or to Naboo? Because her first experience with Padme, when she was, Mon was still a baby senator in her little Senate cradle, still being rocked because she was such a baby when she joined the Senate. Is Padme basically turning around as a planetary leader, being like, nope, I'm calling for a vote of non-confidence, stepping out of place and like stepping out of what was technically her place, because it wasn't Padme's job to call a vote of non-confidence in the Senate. Padme was not a senator at this point in time. And, ultimately what happens from that is that the senator from Naboo becomes chancellor. So it's like, you can understand why Mon is a little bit like,
yeah.
What is going on here?
There's a reason Palpatine, because he knew if he did it, his chances of getting elected were zero.
Exactly.
If he was the one that did it.
Exactly. Right. And so again, like, I'm not blaming Padme, because she was 14 years old and she was a pawn in Palpatine's game. But it's a whole thing that, I'm like, if we look at it by sheer dates alone, who has been a problem for longer in the eyes of Palpatine? It's Mon.
Yeah.
If we look at the date alone, she has been more of a problem than Saw has. And it's like, they're both problems in the eyes of the Empire. It's not a competition, right? And so, it's just one of those things that I wanted to bring up, because I don't feel like either of them could have necessarily taken over the role of the other in a seamless way that wouldn't have caused a lot of problems.
Yeah.
If Mon had to lead the partisans, she'd be like, so maybe we shouldn't shoot first. Maybe we should try to talk. And then that's how she gets shot. If Saw had to lead Rebel High Command, he'd be shot. It would end in both of their deaths. Because High Command would be like, we don't want to just take, or if we wanted to just take orders, we would have A, joined the partisans, or B, joined the Empire. We're here for a reason.
The last thing I'll say about Saw is going back to what you were saying about the Death Star and Chandrila. I think something that's often forgotten about Saw is that he's somebody who feels he has nothing left to lose. Because in Rebels, during the Ghost of Geonosis arc, he says, like, it's too late for my world. My world is gone. Like, he thinks Onderon is lost. He's fighting for it anymore. He's not fighting to save anyone. He's fighting to just put an end to the tyranny. Whereas for Mon, we see that my actions don't just reflect on me. They reflect on all of my people, all of my planet. And I think the Gorman Massacre will solidify that. It's like, hey, even though Mon heavily, vehemently disagrees with him, I don't think she ever would have sanctioned any sort of mission to I think Draven might have, like, under the table, but I don't think she would have ever been on board for that. Because, like, even if she thought he your mission, I think, like, in her, she might not ever say it, but she did kind of respect him in her own way. Like, she, like, agree with you, and, like, we're on the same side, but we're on different sides of this war. But, like, I'm not going to, like, I disagree with you, but I'll defend your right to say it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of Mon's whole interaction with Saw. It's like, we disagree, we are on the same side.
Yeah. And that, I think, is really important because, that's a fundamental block of democracy, is that, you have these ideas, but you are able to disagree on how best to achieve your goals that come from those ideas, and having that dissent. And that's one of the things that you don't get in the Empire, right? Because you don't get really that kind of freedom under fascism. Yeah. Is there anything to say? Because I know you and I could yap about Saw for days.
I think we've about covered it. You know me. I was skeptical when I found out Saw was going to be an Andor. I was, because even though I enjoyed Rogue One, like I said earlier, I didn't love his bed. Like, I'm fully on board now. Like, Tony Gilroy has earned my respect. I trust Saw in his hands.
Yeah.
And, like, I hope character, because in season 1 he was more of a tertiary character. He didn't have that many scenes.
Yeah.
But, like, I really hope this, like, the trailer gave me hope that he's going to take a main. That'll be cool. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. Yeah. So if there's a cult chant of Gilroy at Celebration, will you join in? Will you join us going, Gilroy, 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 Gilroy? Will you join in that now?
I will.
Because I was part of it in 2023 and it was dope.
I'm sure the Andor panel will just be that.
Probably. It's a weird cult chant for Gilroy.
They just turned to him like, man, they really love you, huh?
Yeah. I can't even remember what started it, but I'm pretty sure, like, if you look at the YouTube video of Diego and Tony on the live stage at Celebration 2023, you can hear our cult chant. Which I thought it was great that Genevieve got her, like, own little time, and then Diego and Tony had to share. Diego, for some reason, seems to not be allowed on the live stage alone, because in 2022 in Anaheim, he was up there with Genevieve, and then 2023, he was up there with Tony. Who are they going to stick him with this time? Is it because he's so unhinged and they can't trust him? Maybe. Yeah. So because you've already answered some of these questions, we're going to kind of alter them a little bit. You still have to answer another favorite thing about Mon Mothma later, but from the trailer and the, like, special look at Andor season 2, what are you really excited to see from those specific things? What are you most excited to see play out in Andor season 2? And why is it Dedra v. Edie Karn?
I mean, I have two. The interaction between. Did you hear what I said? Or?
The interaction between
Edie Karn and Dedra.
Yeah.
And the scene at the end with Saw.
And
the scene at the end with the scene at the end with Saw.
And probably Wilmon Pack.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, good.
Those
good. Okay.
Looking forward.
What is your favorite original location in Andor?
I think it's Aldani. Just because, like, I like how they went out of their way to flesh out, like, this isn't just a place where an Imperial base is. Like, there's a culture here. There's people here.
Mm-hmm.
I also liked Narkina 5 just because it goes to show like the sort of sanitized prison environment that we don't really get to see a lot of in this era. But probably Aldani if I had to pick.
Which location are you most excited to explore in season 2?
Yavin 4.
Okay. Because you're right, we haven't seen a lot of Yavin 4 in live action.
Mm-hmm. There was a bit
A
in
New
Rogue
Hope.
One, but it wasn't a lot.
A New Hope, Rogue One, yeah. I'm going to answer these as well. From the trailer and first look, everything to do with Mon Mothma. I want to see what Krennic says to try and put the smolder on her. I want to see Lita's wedding. I want to watch Mon run away from the Senate to go to a place where she's respected and listened to. My favorite original Andor location is Ferrix for me.
Fair.
Because again, I love Aldani. Narkina 5, I have thoughts about. Niamos, triggered. I'm so triggered. Let's go to the beach each. Let's go get arrested. Tell him you mean watch.
The beach from old.
The beach from old. Please. No, I mean, Niamos did give me the best response that I have when I get lifted up by the throat by a K2 unit in Jedi Fallen Order, which I scream at the screen every time it happens. Tell him you mean watch. Tell him you mean watch. Which, I mean, that was just actually like really traumatizing from like a level where it's just like, oh, Sam Witwer gives me chills in that scene. But Ferrix is such a, like, I love the community spirit on Ferrix, right?
Yeah.
And I
mean, it kind of gives that small town aspect to it.
Yeah.
Did so. I think not to speak for you, but I think that it makes sense that would connect a lot for you.
A little bit, because it's like, yeah, I grew up in a small town, but in a lot of ways, it didn't feel as connected as the community on Ferrix did, right? Because like overall, I would say that probably most of the people on Ferrix are more politically and ideologically aligned than they were in my very small, very conservative town growing up. Which, you know, growing up as a member of a marginalized community for being queer, I was afforded certain privileges that more visible minorities, like very like visibly trans people and people of color, were treated very differently in my community, and I didn't align with that. And so Ferrix to me does feel kind of like that small town vibe, but in the very best way, where it's like you will genuinely look out for each other, right? Because, you know, growing up, I had it like there were instances where somebody's house would burn down, and there would be like a little bit of an effort in the community to take care of these families and, like, you know, help get them back on their feet. But there was also a lot of people like complaining about it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, why is it our job to help? Like, can't they do this? Can't they do that? Well, it wasn't my fault that their house burned down. So I was like, it still felt very individualistic growing up, but Ferrix doesn't seem to have that. They, like, none of them want the Empire there, right? They are all willing to band together essentially and break the Imperial regulations of, like, that were laid out for Marva's funeral. And they all seemed to respect her and her words enough to take them to heart and let it drive them to action. And also, you know, just characters like Brasso, when Cassian was just like, basically like, hey, I need an alibi. This is what I came up with. And Brasso's like, actually, I'm going to make it even better for you. I'm going to explain how you got that, like, cut on your face and all of this other stuff. There we go. We're all good. Right. So it very much like feels like that idealistic small town where you're all aligned and you actually feel like a real community. And
Yeah.
to me, it also lives a little bit up to the, like, it takes a village to, like, raise a child. Although in this case, like, it takes a village to be a proper community. And I think the Daughters of Ferrix, which Marva was a past president of, really speaks to that ideal as well, right? Because they are very, like, you know, Brasso's like, they probably have like a warm room somewhere, which means that they provide for their members of the community that are down on their luck or suffering or ill or have had something happen to them. And that is just so important to the ideals of community. And yeah, I really like that. Personally, the area, the location I'm most excited to see in Andor season 2 that we haven't seen in live action before is, can you guess? It's my favoriteest planet in the galaxy.
Chandrilla.
Chandrilla! Ding, ding, ding. I really like Chandrilla. It's the planet where Mon Mothma's from. It's the planet of Mon Mothma. Forget the whole planet. Like, it's like, sure, it's the planet of politics, whatever. It's the planet of Mon Mothma. I want to go to there. But Chandrilla and Ferrix are very much those two, like, two of the planets where I'm like, I want to go to there.
Yeah.
Alderaan in any year except for 0 BBY. Coruscant, never.
Not even there in the High Republic?
Maybe. Would I be allowed to touch Umate is the question. Because Chancellor So was allowed to. And then we see Umate again in Mandalorian season 3. It's like, refrain from making physical contact with Umate. And it's just like, how dare you? How dare you? And also, Umate's like itty bitty by the time of the Mandalorian season 3. And it's taller than Chancellor So in phase 1 of, like, in Light of the Jedi. I'm not going to talk about Umate because they continue building.
Oh, fair.
Right?
Progress.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So, Monument Plaza. Yeah, anyways. Name another character from Andor that you don't like. You mentioned Tim in our Luthen episode.
Sorry, say that again?
Name another character from Andor that you don't like other than Tim. Like, your second least favorite character.
Skeen.
I'm not feeding you answers. Skeen?
Yeah.
I've been having difficulty finding somebody to come on for Skeen. I've also had difficulty finding somebody for K2SO.
I don't know if he deserves a whole episode.
Who, Skeen or K2?
Skeen.
Oh, well, so essentially his actor's birthday is on the 19th. So, you know, if I have to do a Skeen episode by myself...
Why don't you just do one on the whole...
Look. Stop. Let Skeen have a day. Anyways, name another of your favorite things about Mon Mothma. You should have like 7 billion at this point.
I like that she gets really passionate when people question her authority. Like with Saw knows how to press her buttons.
Sorry. I'd like to press her buttons. More like, Mommy, what? You can't hear me, I was muffled. Yeah.
But yeah.
She knows her worth. And if other people don't, that's on them. I know her worth. I'd treat her right, Perrin. I'd be good to her. I wouldn't challenge her authority. She'd be like, I'm in charge. I'd be like, yes, you are. Anyways, I think that's it for us today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, Louay. l-sabersmith on Blue Sky.
Yes.
Yeah. It's pretty cool, I guess.
Come
He
watch
fights with
me.
people about Star Wars. So do I. Yeah, come watch him argue with people about Star Wars. As if you don't follow me for that as well. The Mothma Net can be found at Mothma Updates, and I can be found at Bejeweled Mothma on most social media. We still have those Friday passes for Celebration available. If you're in need, please reach out so I can put you in touch with my friend. My Mon Mothma panel, Senator Rebel Chancellor, who is Mon Mothma, still Friday, 18th of April at 4 p.m. on the fan stage at Celebration. If you can't make it, it's going to be recorded, uploaded to YouTube. It's going to be a great time. We're going to have a great time during the panel, aren't we, Louay?
Yeah.
I'm just going to be clutching Mon like this. Mon in one hand, microphone in the other. Just yeah. Thank you again, Louay. Thank you to everyone watching wherever you're watching from. I hope that Andor season 2 is good to you. I hope that Saw survives Andor season 2. He's not long for the world after Andor season 2, but he's going to survive the season.
Yeah.
He has a little bit of plot armor left. Not as much as Cassian. Definitely not as much as Mon. Our queen of plot armor. I'm putting her in bubble wrap. Thank you, and may the force be with you.
And also with you.
And with your spirit. Thank you very much.